I heard their footsteps fading away, and then I realized I was completely and utterly alone down here. There is a night coming for you that no prayer can delay, and no wealth can prevent from arriving. The sand settles above, the last voice disappears, and in that suffocating darkness, two beings begin to descend. What did you used to say about this man? A question echoes through a space where no living soul can help you now. The Prophet Muhammad described this night in such vivid detail that his companions trembled where they sat listening. What happens next inside that narrow pit of earth will either become your greatest mercy or your worst nightmare. Before we start, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments below. If you already done, let's begin the journey. Every single soul that has ever breathed upon this earth will one day be lowered into the ground alone. This is not a story invented by men, but a reality confirmed by the Lord of all the worlds himself. The Prophet Muhammad spoke about the grave more than almost any other matter of the unseen world beyond. He did not speak to frighten hearts without purpose, but to awaken souls that had fallen deep into heedlessness. 14 centuries ago, in the blessed city of Medina, the companions would sit closely together and listen with trembling hearts. The desert wind would carry silence through the palm trees as the Prophet described what awaits beneath the soil. He told them that when a person dies and the people carry his body, the dead one can still hear. He can hear the footsteps of those who carried him, and he can hear them walking away after the burial. Imagine that moment when the last handful of sand is placed and the voices of your loved ones begin fading. The crowd that prayed over you begins to leave, and the sound of their sandals upon the earth grows quieter. You are now lying beneath layers of heavy earth in a space so tight your shoulders press against the walls. There is no lamp, and there is no window, and there is no companion beside you in that suffocating darkness below. The warmth of the living world above has been replaced by the cold silence of a place between two worlds entirely. This place is called the Barzakh, and it is the realm that separates the life of this world from the next. It is neither the world you once knew, nor is it yet the day when all of mankind shall be gathered. It is something in between, and the Prophet made it absolutely clear that this place is real and inescapable for all. No king has ever avoided it, and no beggar has ever been forgotten by it since the beginning of human existence. Every pharaoh, every tyrant, every scholar, every saint, every mother and every child will enter this stage without any exception. The earth does not care whether you were wrapped in silk or buried in torn cloth when it receives your body. It does not care how many followers praised your name or how many enemies cursed you during your years of living. The only thing that matters now is what you carried inside your heart during those short years above the ground. And in that darkness, something begins to happen that the Prophet described with a precision that shook the hearts of men. Two beings begin their descent toward you, and they are unlike anything you have ever seen or imagined in your life. They are angels, but they are not the kind of angels that bring gentle mercy or soft whispers of comfort to you. These angels have been assigned one single task, and that task is to question you about everything you claim to believe. The Prophet described them as dark in appearance and terrifying in presence, with eyes that pierce through every hidden secret within. Their names, according to the narration found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, are known, and their purpose has been confirmed by authentic reports. They do not arrive with kindness first, because this is not a place of casual conversation between familiar souls at all. They arrive with authority because they have been sent by the one who created the heavens and the earth and everything between. The grave, which moments ago was simply a hole in the ground, now becomes a place of trial and divine reckoning. Everything you ever said about your faith, everything you ever claimed about your belief will now be tested in absolute solitude. There will be no scholar beside you to whisper the correct answer into your ear at that critical and terrifying moment. There will be no friend to hold your hand, and there will be no book open before you to read from. It will be only you and whatever truth or falsehood your soul absorbed during the life you lived above the earth. The companions understood this, and that is exactly why they feared the grave more than almost anything else in this existence. They were the greatest generation of believers to ever walk upon this earth, yet they wept thinking about this encounter. They would stand at the edge of graves after burying their brothers, and their faces would turn pale with deep reflection. They knew that the person they just buried was now facing something that no living person could help them with anymore. The silence of the graveyard carried a weight heavier than mountains, because beneath every mound, a meeting was already taking place. And the Prophet told them exactly what those two angels would say the moment they reached the soul lying below. But what that soul answers and what happens next depends on something most people never take seriously until it is far too late. The two angels sit the soul upright inside that tight and suffocating space where no light has ever touched the walls. The body that was washed and wrapped and prayed over just moments ago is now facing an interrogation beyond all worldly trials. There is no court, and there is no jury, and there is no lawyer standing beside you to argue your case. There is only you and two beings whose very presence causes the soul to tremble in a way it has never known. The first question comes, and it strikes the soul like a thunderbolt crashing through the silence of that dark and narrow place. They ask the soul who its Lord is, and in that moment, every distraction of the worldly life is completely stripped away. This is not a question of memorization, because the tongue of the dead does not move by the power of knowledge alone. The tongue moves only if the heart truly knew the answer and lived upon that answer every single day above the ground. A believer whose heart was alive with faith will feel the answer rise from within, like water rising from a deep spring. The answer comes not from the mind, but from the depths of a soul that spent its life in sincere worship. But the one who lived without certainty will find that the answer does not come, no matter how desperately the tongue tries. The mouth opens, but nothing emerges except confusion, and the soul begins to feel a terror it has never experienced before now. The second question follows immediately, and the angels ask about the religion that the soul followed during its entire life on earth. Again, the believer answers with a calm certainty that can only be granted by the mercy and the permission of Allah alone. And again, the hypocrite stammers and struggles because the heart that never truly believed cannot produce an answer in that moment of truth. The third question is about the Prophet Muhammad and who he was and what the soul truly believed about his message. This is where the distinction between real faith and shallow imitation becomes absolutely and painfully clear for every soul being tested below. The one who loved the Prophet and followed his path will answer with a peace that fills that entire dark space. But the one who only repeated words without understanding or conviction will find nothing except emptiness echoing inside that hollow, trembling chest. The Prophet explained that the believer will say that this man was the messenger of Allah sent with truth and guidance. And the angels will confirm that they already knew this soul would answer correctly, because its faith was written upon its heart. Then something miraculous begins to happen inside that grave, and the entire reality of that narrow space begins to shift and change. The grave expands and stretches to 70 cubits by 70 cubits in every direction, as reported in the authentic narration of Tirmidhi. Light begins to pour into that space, and the suffocating darkness that once filled it is replaced by a gentle, soothing radiance. The soil that once pressed against the body now feels softer than the finest cloth ever woven by human hands on earth. A window is opened toward paradise, and through it comes a fragrance so beautiful that the soul has never encountered anything like it. The breeze that enters carries the scent of gardens that no eye has seen and no ear has heard described in fullness. The soul is then told to sleep and rest like a bride on the night of her wedding, surrounded by peace and safety. It sleeps a sleep so sweet and so deep that nothing disturbs it until the day when Allah commands all souls to rise. This is the reward for the one who lived with sincerity and died upon the truth that was planted deep within the heart. But now the scene shifts, and the same grave, the same earth, the same darkness holds a very different soul within its grip. The one who could not answer is now staring into the faces of the two angels with nothing left to offer except regret. The angels already knew this soul would fail, because the signs of its hypocrisy were written long before it entered the ground. There is no second chance, and there is no appeal, and there is no one above the earth who can intervene anymore. The earth is commanded to constrict, and it obeys, immediately pressing inward upon the body from every side without mercy or hesitation now. The ribs crack under the pressure, and the chest collapses inward, and the pain is not like any pain the living world contains. This is not a metaphor, and this is not poetry, because the Prophet described it as a literal, physical reality beneath the soil. A window is opened, but this time it opens toward the fire, and through it comes a heat that scorches the soul endlessly. The grave becomes a pit of punishment, and the soul screams, but no one above the earth can hear its desperate cries. This torment does not end after one night or 1 week, because it continues until the day Allah resurrects every soul from below. And the difference between these two endings was never about wealth or status, but about what the heart carried while it was alive. The companions who heard these words from the Prophet did not simply nod their heads and return to their normal lives. Something broke inside them that day, and the world they once chased with eager hands suddenly lost all of its false shine. They looked at the marketplace differently, because every transaction, every coin, every deal now carried the weight of an eternal consequence ahead. They looked at their beds differently, because every night they lay down, they wondered if this would be their final sleep above. They looked at the graves differently, because every mound of earth they passed was a silent witness to a trial already happening. One of the closest companions of the Prophet would stand at the edge of a grave and weep until his beard was soaked. He was asked why he wept so intensely when the mention of other stages of the afterlife did not affect him this way. He explained that the grave is the very first stage of the journey, and if a soul fails here, everything after becomes worse. And if a soul succeeds here, then everything that follows becomes easier, and the path ahead opens with mercy from the Most High. This understanding shattered the illusion that the grave is merely a resting place where the body quietly dissolves into the surrounding earth below. The grave is alive with consequence, and every moment inside it is either a moment of mercy or a moment of unbearable suffering. The Prophet made this truth even more vivid when he described what the soul sees after the questioning has finally been completed. For the believer, a figure appears inside the grave, and it is the most beautiful form the soul has ever seen in existence. Its face radiates light, and its clothing is pure white, and a fragrance surrounds it that fills the entire expanse of the grave. The soul asks this figure who it is, because never in the world above did it encounter anything so beautiful and so peaceful. The figure reveals that it is the good deeds of that soul gathered and shaped into a form of indescribable beauty and light. Every prayer offered in the quiet hours before dawn, every charity given in secret, every hardship endured with patience now has a face. Every tear shed in sincere repentance, every moment of restraint from sin, every act of kindness done only for Allah now stands present. The soul realizes that every small act of obedience it struggled to maintain during its life has now become its closest eternal companion. This companion will remain with the soul throughout the entire duration of the Barzakh, offering comfort and peace until the final resurrection day. But for the soul that failed the questioning, a different figure appears, and it is the most hideous form ever witnessed by any creation. Its face is dark and twisted, and its clothing is filthy, and a stench surrounds it that makes the grave feel even more suffocating. The soul recoils in horror and begs this figure to leave, but the figure steps closer and reveals its true and devastating identity. It is the evil deeds of that soul, gathered and shaped into a form that reflects every sin, every betrayal, every moment of defiance. Every prayer abandoned, every lie spoken, every act of cruelty, every moment of arrogance now stands before the soul in its ugliest form. This figure does not leave because it is bound to the soul, and it will remain as its companion throughout the entire time below. The soul that once chased pleasure and ignored the warnings of the Prophet now has nothing except regret and this horrifying presence beside it. There is no escape from this companion, and there is no wall to hide behind, and there is no sleep to find relief within. The Prophet narrated these details not as distant theological concepts, but as urgent warnings meant to change the way people live every day. He wanted his companions to understand that every single choice they made in the world above would take a physical form in the world below. The good you do does not vanish when you die, because it transforms into something that will embrace you in your darkest, loneliest hour. And the evil you do does not disappear, either, because it transforms into something that will haunt you in a place where no one can help. This is the turning point where the reality of the grave stops being a story heard in a gathering and becomes deeply, urgently personal. The companions walked away from these gatherings completely changed because they understood that the grave is not the end, but the true beginning. They increased their worship, and they guarded their tongues, and they gave charity as though their lives depended on what they sent ahead. They raced toward good deeds, not because they wanted praise from people, but because they wanted a beautiful companion waiting for them below. They abandoned sins, not merely out of fear of punishment, but because they could not bear the thought of that hideous figure beside them. The entire city of Medina shifted in its spirit after these narrations, because no heart could carry this knowledge and remain unchanged afterward. The night prayers grew longer, and the tears grew heavier, and the desire for this world grew weaker in the hearts of the faithful. And yet, despite all of these warnings, there were still those who heard the truth and turned away, choosing comfort over preparation for what awaits. The warnings of the Prophet about the grave did not only move the hearts of his companions in that blessed generation. These narrations echoed through the centuries, reaching every corner of the earth, where a believing heart was willing to stop and truly listen. Scholars of the earliest generations, after the companions, carried these words with a weight that shaped their entire approach to life and worship. They would visit the graveyards not as a ritual of sorrow, but as a deliberate act of remembering what awaits every living soul. They would stand silently among the mounds of earth and reflect upon the fact that beneath each one, a soul was experiencing reality. Some of those souls were resting in gardens of light, surrounded by beauty and peace that no tongue could ever fully describe above. And some of those souls were trapped in constriction and darkness, enduring a punishment that would not cease until the day of resurrection. The scholars would return from those visits with softened hearts and renewed determination to spend every remaining breath in obedience to Allah alone. One of the great scholars of the early generations was once asked why he never laughed, and his answer silenced everyone in the room. He said that a person who knows what the grave contains and what awaits inside it could never find reason to laugh carelessly again. This was not a man who lacked joy, but a man whose joy was anchored in the hope of meeting Allah with a clean heart. He understood that every moment spent in heedlessness was a moment stolen from the preparation that every soul desperately needs before entering the earth. The impact of these narrations was not limited to scholars alone, because even the common people of those early generations lived with this awareness. Merchants in the ancient marketplaces of Baghdad and Damascus would pause in the middle of their trade to remember the reality of the grave. Mothers would hold their children close and whisper prayers of protection, asking Allah to grant their families safety in the trial beneath the ground. Soldiers standing on the edge of battle would think not of the enemy before them, but of the earth that might receive them. They did not fear death because they feared the absence of life, but because they feared meeting the two angels without a prepared heart. The entire Muslim civilization for centuries was built upon this acute awareness that life above the ground is only a temporary, fleeting opportunity. Every mosque that was raised from the earth was raised by hands that understood the earth would one day rise over them instead. Every act of charity that flowed through those ancient cities flowed from hearts that knew their deeds would take form inside the grave. The night prayers echoed through the streets of Medina and Kufa and Basra because the believers could not sleep while the grave awaited them. They would rise in the last third of the night when the world was silent and pour their fears into prostration before their Lord. Their tears would soak the ground beneath their foreheads, and they would beg Allah to make their graves spacious and filled with light. They would recite Surah Al-Mulk because the Prophet taught that this chapter intercedes for its companion and protects them from the punishment below. They held onto every authentic teaching about the grave like a drowning traveler holds onto a rope thrown from the shore of salvation itself. The fear of the grave did not paralyze them, but instead it propelled them forward into action and devotion and sincerity beyond what others imagined. It was this fear that made them honest in their dealings because they knew that every lie would take a form beside them below. It was this fear that made them generous with their wealth because they knew that every coin withheld would become a burden in the grave. It was this fear that made them guard their tongues because they knew that every harmful word would echo in that narrow space forever. And it was this same fear that made them love the Prophet so deeply because his guidance was the only light in that darkness. Without his warnings, they would have entered the grave blind and unprepared, and without his teachings, they would have had no answers to give. He was the one who told them exactly what to expect and exactly how to prepare and exactly what deeds would save them below. His mercy to this nation was not only in the message of hope he brought, but also in the warnings he delivered with love. He did not hide the truth to make people comfortable, because comfort built upon ignorance leads only to devastation when the reality finally arrives. He spoke clearly and he spoke often, and he made sure that no one who listened to him could claim they were never warned. The companions carried this trust forward, and the scholars preserved it, and the generations passed it down like a torch through the corridors of time. And now that torch has reached your hands, and the question is no longer about what happens in the grave, because you already know. The question now is what you will do with this knowledge before the earth opens beneath your feet and the two angels begin their descent. Every day that passes is one day closer to that meeting, and every night that falls is a rehearsal for the night that never ends. The soul that ignores this truth does not escape it because the grave does not ask permission before it receives whoever Allah has decreed for it. The story of the grave is not an ancient tale locked away in dusty books that no longer speak to the living world. It is the most urgent reality facing every single person alive today, whether they walk the streets of London or the roads of Lahore. The same earth that buried the companions of the Prophet 14 centuries ago is the same earth that will receive you one day, The same two angels that descended upon the earliest believers will descend upon you with the same questions and the same terrifying authority. Nothing has changed about the grave since the Prophet first described it, because the rules of the unseen do not bend with time. The only thing that has changed is the level of heedlessness that covers the hearts of those who walk above the ground today. We live in a time where distractions are endless and where the remembrance of death has been pushed to the furthest corners of thought. People build homes as though they will live in them forever, and they accumulate wealth as though it will follow them into the earth. They scroll through endless images and sounds and voices while the clock of their life ticks closer to the moment of no return. They argue about matters that will hold no weight on the day they are lowered into a hole and left completely and utterly alone. But the believer who carries the awareness of the grave inside their heart walks through this modern world with a clarity others cannot understand. They see the same streets and the same buildings and the same crowds, but their eyes are fixed upon a destination beyond all of it. They do not live in constant terror because the Prophet taught that preparation removes fear and replaces it with a calm, steady hope instead. The one who prepares for the grave does not dread it, but instead approaches it, knowing that their deeds have already gone ahead of them. And the preparation is not complicated because it begins with the most fundamental truth that the heart must carry sincerely until its very last beat. That truth is that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his final messenger sent to all mankind. This is the answer that the angels are waiting to hear, and this is the answer that will unlock the mercy of the grave. But the answer must be real, and it must come from a heart that lived upon this truth, not merely a tongue that repeated it. The scholars of Islam have taught that the grave rewards sincerity above all else because the soul cannot lie when it stands before the angels. Every prayer you offer today is a brick of light being placed inside your grave long before your body ever reaches that place below. Every moment of patience you endure during hardship is a shield being forged that will protect you when the earth closes over your chest. Every sin you abandon for the sake of Allah is a chain being removed from around the neck of your soul before it descends. Every verse of the Quran you recite with reflection is a companion being sent ahead to stand beside you in your loneliest, darkest hour. The Prophet taught that Surah Al-Mulk is a protector and an intercessor for the one who recites it consistently before sleeping each night. He taught that the prayer for seeking refuge from the punishment of the grave should be made in every single sitting of the final tashahhud. He gave this nation every tool it needs to face the grave with confidence and peace, and yet so many remain asleep and unaware. The grave is not something to ignore until old age arrives, because death does not wait for wrinkles or gray hair or retirement plans. It comes to the young and the old and the healthy and the sick, and it comes at a time no soul can predict. The only wise response to this truth is to begin preparing right now with every prayer and every deed and every breath of remembrance. Let the awareness of the grave soften your heart and straighten your path and remind you of what truly matters before your time runs out. Let it make you kinder to your parents because you do not know if this is your last chance to earn their prayers. Let it make you more honest in your words because every lie is a darkness that will follow you into that narrow space below. Let it make you more generous with your wealth because every charity is a light that will be waiting for you when the angels arrive. Let it pull you closer to the Quran because the words of Allah are the greatest protection any soul can carry into the next world. Let it bring you to your knees in the last third of the night when Allah descends to the lowest heaven and asks who calls. That is the hour when prayers are answered, and that is the hour when the preparation for the grave reaches its most powerful and sincere form. The Prophet did not tell us about the grave to leave us in despair, but to give us a chance to change before it arrives. His mercy was in the warning itself, because a warning given with love is the greatest gift any soul can receive before its final journey. The grave is coming, and it will not delay for anyone, and the only question that remains is what you will bring with you inside. Will it be light or will it be darkness? And will your companion be beautiful or will it be something you cannot bear to face? The answer is still in your hands today, so do not let this moment pass without making the choice that will echo through your eternity.